Was the Sabbath only for the Jews? My name is Melvin. Welcome to the series Sabbath Questions, in which we discuss 13 popular questions about whether the Sabbath is still relevant for us or not. And probably one of the claims that I've heard the most as to why we shouldn't keep the Bible Sabbath anymore is supposedly that it was only for the Jews. I've heard it from friends, I've heard it from pulpits, I've read it in commentaries. It's a prevalent theory in the Christian world. But the answer, it's actually really simple. And towards the end of the video, I'll show you why. But first I want to address where this confusion even comes from. But before we do that, it's time for the comment challenge. Comment below, what in the biblical history of the Jewish people do you find admirable or inspiring? A story, principles, lifestyle, whatever. I love to see the comment section of this video turn into a valley of monuments of respect to those who have gone before us. I believe the reason why so many Christians consider the Sabbath day a day of the Jews is because they think the Sabbath first publicly came to the scene when in Exodus 20 God gave Moses, as the representative of the Jewish people, the 10 Commandments on Mount Sinai. And because these laws were given to Moses and to the Jews, we as Christians don't need to concern ourselves with those. But were the 10 Commandments just given to the Jews? Did you know that those same Israelites already kept the Sabbath before Mount Sinai, when God did this weekly miracle in the desert to provide food for them? Of Abraham, it is even said that he kept God's commandments and statutes. And all the way back, the fact that Cain's murder is called a sin indicates that there was already a law to define what is sin and what isn't. But also, Paul, in the New Testament, as a former Jew converted to Christianity, still writes, "Do we then make void the law through faith? Certainly not. On the contrary, we establish the law." And even in the last book of the Bible, Revelation, it describes God's end-time people as commandment keepers. You can look up Revelation 14, verse 12, for example. Now, it isn't so strange that some may believe that the laws given at Mount Sinai were just for the Jews, because many of those laws were indeed given to just the Jews. God gave specific instructions and regulations for them to establish a theocracy, a priesthood, a sacrificial system, and things like that. And Moses wrote all of that down and communicated those to the people. Those laws were for them. And we'll talk about those more in a later episode in the series. But the 10 Commandments, God spoke with his own voice for all to hear. He wrote it down twice with his own finger on stone. They transcend ethnicity, geography, politics. They are timeless principles of life. And as Christians, we kind of all agree to that, at least with 9 of them. No stealing, no adultery, no worshiping idols. I mean, we get that. But for some reason, many Christians pluck out the Sabbath from among these immutable laws of life, pluck it out and say, yeah, but not this one. This one was just for the Jews. Now let me ask you, guess how many times does the Bible refer to the 7th day as the Sabbath of the Jews, the day of the Jews? Have you made your guess? The answer is a whopping 0 times. Not once does the Bible call the Sabbath the day of the Jews. And that makes sense because the Sabbath was instituted 2,300 years before there even was a Jew. Jesus created the Sabbath in creation week according to the perfect design that he envisioned in his mind for our human existence. And what makes the answer to the question of this video so simple is because the creator of the Sabbath himself tells us exactly who he made it for. And he said to them, the Sabbath was made for man, and not man for the Sabbath. The word that's translated to man in Greek, it doesn't mean Jews. It means mankind, the human race. So if Jesus, the creator, says he made the Sabbath for the human race, he writes it in stone among other immutable laws of life with his own finger, then what are we doing saying, yeah, no, but that one is still just for the Jews? I mean, that's quite disrespectful and even arrogant, wouldn't you say? Especially given the fact that the Sabbath is never called the day of the Jews, it is called the day of the Lord. He claims the Sabbath as his holy day. He made it for our sake, it's for our benefit, but it's his holy day. So for us to think that we can decide who it's for and not and do with it what we want, God actually says something about that kind of attitude. He says, if you turn your foot away from the Sabbath, to put your foot on something in their time and culture, it meant to claim it as yours. So if we turn our foot away, it means we do not claim it as ours. He says, if you turn your foot away from the Sabbath, from doing your pleasure on my holy day, and call the Sabbath a delight, the holy day of the Lord honorable, and shall honor him, not doing your own ways, nor finding your own pleasure, nor speaking your own words, then you shall delight yourself in the Lord. And I will cause you to ride on the high hills of the earth, and feed you with the heritage of Jacob your father. The mouth of the Lord has spoken. I suggest we think twice about how we talk about God's holy Sabbath and how we treat it. But if to you, the Sabbath kind of feels like this burden, feels like it's restricting you. Bondage is a word that Christians sometimes use to describe their view of the Sabbath. I get that. I've been there. I felt that too. But let me encourage you with the words of John. For this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not burdensome. To me now, the Sabbath absolutely doesn't feel like a burden anymore. It's genuinely the day of the week that I look forward to most. So if you feel like it's a burden, then there's something for you to discover, a gift to unwrap. And if you haven't seen the first episode of this series, I can recommend you start there. Now, if the Sabbath is for humanity, for all of us, including then those living after Jesus, then why doesn't the New Testament repeat the Sabbath commandment? In the next episode, we'll see how the lack of its repetition doesn't mean that it has lost its relevance for us, as some claim, but actually that it enforces its validity. Now remember, you don't just want to be a hearer of the word, you want to be a doer. And the best way for you to make this message your own, to act on it in your life, and even be able to teach it to others, is to write down in your own words what you have learned. So comment below your summary of this episode. I'll choose one of them and I'll pin ya. Maranatha from Norway.